Some places don't want to be understood. Yellowstone may look eternal and untouchable, but beneath its beauty, it hides the stories of those who entered and never came back. Tonight, we follow three strange disappearances. A woman who walked away from a crash and vanished, a teenager who disappeared on a school trip, and a hiker who knew the trails too well to simply lose her way. These are the mysteries of Patricia Meehan, Trenny Gibson, and Thelma Melton. Patricia Meehan was 37 years old, known to her friends and family simply as Patty. She had grown up in Pennsylvania, but by the late 1980s, she had settled in Montana, drawn to its wide-open skies and slower pace of life. To those who knew her, Patricia was kind and gentle, but also restless. She often felt torn between the stability of rural life and a desire to see more of the world. Friends later recalled that she was contemplative, searching for something greater, though no one knew exactly what. On the evening of April 20th, 1989, Patricia got behind the wheel of her car and set out along Montana Highway 200 near Circle. The two-lane road stretched across the plains bordered by open fields and fences, the kind of landscape that can make a person feel both free and isolated. As the sun fell behind the horizon, what happened next would become one of the strangest disappearance stories in the state. At around 8:15 p.m., Patricia's car collided head-on with another vehicle. The accident wasn't fatal. No one was killed, and injuries were minor. What made the event unusual was not the crash itself, but what Patricia did afterward. Witnesses reported that she stepped out of a car calmly, not panicked or hurt. Instead, she looked around dreamily, as though not fully present. Then, without speaking, she climbed a nearby fence and began walking into a wide, open field. Observers shouted for her to come back, but she never turned around. Her steps were steady, yet distant, more like someone in a trance than in shock. It wasn't a hurried escape, but something deliberate, though inexplicable. When investigators followed her trail, they found footprints in the soft dirt. For several hundred yards, the prints led away from the road, but then without warning, they stopped. There was no sign she had continued on, returned, or struggled. It was as though she had vanished into thin air. Why would Patricia walk away from the scene of an accident without a word? Why head into the darkness with no supplies, no flashlight, and no destination? And most chilling of all, how could her trail just end? A massive search effort followed. Helicopters scanned the fields and riverbanks, dogs tracked scents, and dozens of volunteers combed the area. Despite the intensity of the operation, nothing was found. No clothing, no personal items, no trace of Patricia at all. Within days, the case took on an eerie reputation. Some searchers whispered it was as though Patricia had stepped out of the world. In the years that followed, the mystery only deepened. Thousands of alleged sightings of Patricia were reported, not just in Montana, but as far away as Washington State, Seattle, and even Yellowstone. Witnesses described a woman who looked uncannily like her, sometimes disheveled, sometimes withdrawn, often staring off as if disconnected from reality. At least one sighting came from a police officer, lending credibility, but despite so many claims, Patricia herself was never located. Speculation spread in every direction. Some believed she suffered a psychological break, perhaps triggered by the accident, and wandered away to start a new life. Others thought she had died at the fields that night, her body somehow missed despite extensive searching. Some suggested head trauma or shock disoriented her, leading her to walk farther than expected and succumb to the elements. Yet, if that were true, why did sightings continue for years afterward? Then there were stranger theories. A few whispered she had crossed into another reality that night, slipping through a crack in the world and leaving behind only footprints that stopped where her reality no longer aligned. Over the decades, Patricia Meehan's story has grown into legend. More than 5,000 reported sightings have been logged, yet not one confirmed. She remains frozen in memory as the woman who calmly walked away from a car accident, disappeared into a Montana field, and was never seen again. Patricia Meehan is still missing. Her case remains one of the most haunting disappearances in modern American history, a reminder of how quickly someone can step out of the ordinary and into the unexplained. But Patricia wasn't the only one tied to Yellowstone whose story defies explanation. Just over a decade earlier, a teenager disappeared from a place meant to be safe, a school trip. And before we continue, if mysteries like these grip you, make sure to subscribe, because we dive deep into stories the world still can't explain. In 1976, 16-year-old Trenny Gibson set out on what was supposed to be an ordinary school field trip to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. She was a quiet, thoughtful student, dependable, kind, and somewhat reserved. Nothing about her suggested recklessness, and no one could have imagined she would soon be at the center of one of the park's most haunting mysteries. That October morning, Trenny boarded the bus with dozens of classmates. Their plan was simple: a long hike through the park's rugged trails, surrounded by sweeping mountain views and the crisp air of autumn. For much of the hike, she stayed with the group, sometimes stepping slightly ahead, but always within sight. Witnesses later recalled she seemed calm and focused on the trail. But sometime in the early afternoon, everything changed. Trenny was walking just a few steps ahead when she rounded a bend in the trail. It was nothing unusual, just a curve lined with trees and brush. Yet when her classmates reached the same point moments later, she was gone. There was no scream, no sound, no sign. She had left the path. She had simply vanished. At first, students thought she had wandered slightly ahead. Teachers urged calm, assuming she might be sitting farther up the trail. But as minutes passed without her return, concern turned to panic. A search began almost immediately, with classmates, rangers, dogs, and helicopters scouring the area. Despite the massive effort, no sign of her was ever found. Not a footprint, not a piece of clothing, not a clue. It was as if the forest had swallowed her whole. Theories multiplied. Some believed Trenny had strayed from the path, perhaps chasing an animal or distracted by something in the trees, but the terrain was steep, and search teams should have found evidence. Others suggested she was abducted, snatched away in broad daylight. But how? Surrounded by so many people, only steps away? Her classmates recalled unsettling details. A few whispered she had seemed strangely restless before she vanished, glancing toward the woods as if something had caught her attention. One rumor suggested she might have been lured by something or someone only she could see. Over the years, explanations have ranged from tragic accident to deliberate abduction. And then there are those who look to the supernatural. The Smokies are steeped in legends of spirits, strange lights, and places where the veil between worlds is thin. Could Trenny have stepped into one of these thin places, vanishing not just from sight, but from reality itself? Her family never stopped searching for answers. For years they hoped she might still be alive, perhaps taken or choosing to leave. But as the decades passed without a trace, hope dimmed. Official records list her as missing, presumed dead. Yet the story refuses to fade. For those who were there, the memory is sharp. One moment Trenny was hiking with them, the next she was gone. No noise, no warning, just absence. Today, hikers still walk those same trails, often unaware of the mystery tied to them. But for those who know the story of Trenny Gibson, every bend in the path feels heavier, every quiet stretch of woods more unsettling. It remains one of the great unsolved disappearances of the Smoky Mountains, a reminder that sometimes the wilderness doesn't just take, it erases. And yet, even experience can't protect you, because our final case is not a child or a traveler, but a seasoned hiker who knew Yellowstone's trails as well as anyone. In September of 1981, 58-year-old Thelma Melton set out on a hike in Yellowstone National Park with two close friends. To those who knew her, Thelma wasn't an adventurer chasing thrill or danger. She was a woman who loved routine, the outdoors, and the familiar comfort of well-worn trails. Hiking had long been one of her favorite pastimes, and Yellowstone held a special place in her heart. This wasn't a daring expedition into remote backcountry. It was meant to be a peaceful walk along a trail she had traveled many times before. The day itself was calm and unremarkable. The group walked together, chatting and enjoying the scenery, moving at an easy pace. Nothing about the hike suggested that anything unusual was about to happen. Yet, as the path curved ahead and the sunlight fell in slanted beams through the trees, Thelma did something unexpected. She quickened her steps. Her friends noticed that she began walking a little faster, gaining ground on them. She was still within sight, her figure clearly visible on the trail just a short distance ahead. They assumed she was simply feeling energetic or wanted a moment to herself. After all, she was familiar with the trail. There was no reason to worry. But within minutes, their casual confidence turned to confusion. As they rounded a bend in the path, they expected to see her waiting just ahead, maybe standing to catch her breath or smiling as they caught up. Instead, the trail was empty. Her figure was gone. They called out her name, their voices echoing into the surrounding forest. No answer. They hurried forward, scanning the trail, searching the brush and trees for movement. Nothing. The landscape was open enough that someone only seconds ahead should have been visible. Yet Thelma was simply gone. What made her speed up on such a casual, friendly walk? Why hadn't she responded when her friends called? And how could she vanish so completely in the span of only a few moments? Her companions alerted authorities almost immediately, and within hours, the search began. Park rangers organized a large-scale effort, bringing in helicopters, dogs, and hundreds of volunteers to comb the area. They scoured the trail and surrounding woods, calling her name, retracing every possible route she might have taken. They searched for footprints, scraps of clothing, or anything she might have dropped. Days passed. The terrain was covered extensively, but no sign of Thelma ever surfaced. The theories began quickly. Some suggested that she had suffered a sudden medical emergency, a heart attack or a stroke, and collapsed somewhere out of sight. But such an event would likely have left some trace, and exhaustive searches failed to uncover a body. Others whispered the possibility of abduction, though the idea seemed improbable. Thelma had disappeared in broad daylight on a popular trail, with friends only moments behind her. The circumstances left little room for such a theory to comfortably fit. Then came the stranger explanations. Over the years, Yellowstone has become associated with unusual disappearances, places where people seem to vanish without logical explanation. Some describe them as vanishing points, thin spaces where the boundary between our world and something else wears thin. To those who lean toward the paranormal, Thelma's case became yet another piece of evidence that Yellowstone holds secrets far beyond what science can neatly explain. Her disappearance hit her family hard. She was not a reckless woman, nor someone likely to wander off deliberately without telling anyone. Friends and loved ones were devastated by the lack of closure. Unlike cases where a body is eventually recovered, allowing grief to settle into certainty, Thelma's story offered nothing but questions. In the years since, the image remains frozen for those who were with her that day. A woman just ahead on the trail, walking with purpose, her figure clearly in view. Then, with no sound, no cry, and no sign of struggle, she was gone. What makes Thelma's disappearance particularly haunting is its simplicity. There were no storms, no rugged cliffs, no treacherous rivers nearby. There was no moment of chaos or panic. She did not stray miles away into uncharted wilderness. She was walking on a trail she knew well, only steps ahead of her friends on a bright afternoon. And yet, after 4 decades, there has never been a single piece of evidence to explain what happened. To this day, visitors to Yellowstone sometimes stop and think of her when stepping along the same kinds of wooded paths. They wonder, how can someone vanish so completely in such a short span of time? Was it fate, chance, or something else entirely? For those who knew her, the question is even sharper. Thelma Pauline Melton did not just disappear into Yellowstone, she disappeared into mystery itself. 3 vanishings, 3 different lives, one place that holds them. Patricia Meehan, who stepped from an accident into mystery. Trenny Gibson, who vanished from a trail in the space of seconds. Thelma Melton, who walked ahead and never returned. No bodies, no answers, just silence. Which story stayed with you the most? What do you think really happened? Tell us in the comments. And if you're ready for the next descent into the unknown, subscribe. Because in Yellowstone, the land doesn't always give back what it takes.